questions. So, Seth Kostek, we spoke on Twitter a while ago, and you have some fabulous ideas about the nature of consciousness and like how to, the fact that we aren't actually separate as an observer. I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself, and then we can just like break out into some discussion and see where it takes us.
Yeah, my name is Seth Kostek. I am fascinated by consciousness and science and the big questions in life, the existential questions. Why are we here? Where do we come from? What is all of this? And through life, I took this path through science. I became a scientist I went to Georgetown University as an undergraduate in biology, and then I matriculated to University of California, Berkeley for my PhD. And I was looking for the answers. And when I was in science, I kind of found out that the way I was pursuing understanding the world through science was never going to get me the answers I was looking for. So it's not that science is flawed. It's our understanding of what science is and how it works. And all of our misconceptions and misunderstandings of actuality and truth and where science, how science uses the truth to create models and conceptual understandings of what's occurring. We are misunderstanding that. And
we've been
this
on the
is
same
why
map for about 100 years.
Yeah, but this is why we're never going to, with these misconceptions, we're never going to get to the answer.
Right. So I mean, I was watching a really good show yesterday. It's one of these like anime shows, like Children of Orbit, and I didn't really have many like conceptions about it, but towards the end, and I mean like spoilers for anybody watching, so you might want to skip ahead a little bit, but it goes into like the nature of science and how like there's this kind of breakdown between like how we think of science without an observer, and like it's almost like a very materialistic like I remember in one of your videos you talk about material physicalism, and that we need to transfer to a more like mind-centered sense of science, if that makes sense.
Well, what is science? What's the word science mean?
I have no idea. I haven't looked at the
science is derived from the Latin sciens, which means knowing.
Okay, well there you go.
So it's consciousness, and that's really the arbiter of truth. So because that is the truth. So I mean, how I'd like to start this is actually I'd like to ask you a question to start off to kind of tease this out. And this is where everything goes sideways, is because through our conversations on Twitter and stuff, I mean, I could tell you're dying to get to, multi-dimensional space-time, curved space and singularities and things like that. So
my interpretation of where this is going to go is that like we're talking about consciousness and like how it all kind of comes together, and like we've got these like 100-year-old maps of like how science is supposed to work.
Yeah.
But we've never really been able to integrate the observer. Like there's a lot of like spiritual new age kind of BS that's kind of come onto the scene, but that's kind of like the bubbling of something maybe more major that I think you've discovered.
Okay. Well, let's start with this question, and we'll see if this goes in a direction or it goes off the rails. Well, I'll try to corral you into where I want to lead you, but we'll see what happens. So the question is, why do you have perception?
Why do I have perception? Well, I've evolved this way, right?
No, I mean, right now, I mean, are you having this conversation with your eyes open or closed?
So my eyes are open.
Now, why?
Because my body wants it to, I guess.
Okay. Well, you're looking at the screen and you're actually looking you're not looking into the camera. You're looking at my face. Well, why are
your face, actually.
when you open your eyes, why do you know that this is, well, how do you determine that a face is here?
Well, because there's an image.
Why aren't you looking over there? Why aren't you looking behind you? Right. So why do you have perception? I mean, you're looking at the computer for a reason.
Yeah, because I see your face on it, right?
Okay,
so I'm looking into your eyes as if they were your eyes, right?
Okay, but why are you not looking at the empty space here?
Well, because this just is a natural human evolved trait to look at humans.
Okay, okay. So let's just make this simpler. Okay, so I've got an.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Is there an object here?
Well, allegedly, yes.
Okay, and is there no object here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why is there not a cube here in this empty space?
Because you are holding a cube in a separate part of space.
Okay. Let's roll this. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at is what about perception is necessary, right, to determine that there's a cube here and not one here?
Right. So okay, I'm seeing an image of a cube on the screen.
Okay, great. And you're not seeing one here.
Yes, I'm not seeing the one there. Okay.
So enough, yeah. But why did you have to open up your eyes to determine that? So if you close your eyes right now,
okay,
is there a cube there?
No, there is no cube there.
Okay, so now you open up your eyes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now there's a cube there.
Okay, so were you aware of the cube when your eyes were closed?
Yeah, because I'd seen a cube prior.
No, when your eyes are closed, close your eyes.
Yeah.
Is there a cube there?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Correct. So your knowledge.
Okay.
So you had to open your eyes because you believe that the knowledge, the knower, the observer, consciousness is inside your skull, right?
Yes. Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Between my body and the.
Okay. So perception, right? So the whole point of perception is that when you're not looking at something, when you're not perceiving, you can't determine if there's anything occurring.
Right. So this is like if a tree falls in the forest, it's going to be here.
Correct. Right? But so this is key though. So now when you are perceiving, you're perceiving a cube because you believe that this is a physical material world out here. Okay. Light is interacting with the cube, going across space-time, going into your eye, making an image. And this image, this whole cube, this is inside your skull.
Yeah, okay.
Produced by neurobiological activity, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm getting you now.
So an object for you under your belief system, you believe this object is outside of consciousness, and the image that you're knowing of it is inside of consciousness. So knowing an image of an object from light that had interacted with it outside of consciousness determines the occurrence of the object. And here in the empty space where there's no object, there was no interaction with light with anything. So when light traverses a space-time volume and goes in your eyes and produces not a perceptual image, the lack of a perceptual image, that tells you nothing exists here, right?
Yeah, I guess this is the kind of thing about air, right? So air exists, but we can't see it. So
we're talking about light resolvable objects here.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're doing perception. I can't perceive something that's not light.
My reason for saying this is that I think a lot of people they don't think about like airflows and all this kind of thing because they can't see it, right? So it's not in their perception, so they don't perceive it as real.
Yeah, but
in the moment,
if I had a snorkel or something, I could evacuate all the air in here. You don't need air at all.
Yeah.
For any of this. So here's the key, and the reason, the sort of answer I'm trying to lead you to is the reason why you need perception is because you cannot determine occurrence without it. So what we need to analyze.
Right, okay, hold up a second. I'm almost there.
Yeah.
It's that. So, in order to determine causality, so like there being something versus there not being something, I need to be able to experience it in some way. I guess like I don't want to say like I can see it, because there's more to experience than just seeing.
Well, is it possible to determine the occurrence of something without perception? Is that possible?
I mean, we build tools to do that, but otherwise,
without perception.
Otherwise,
is it possible to determine the occurrence without it? You don't have the five senses. No five senses. Can you determine the occurrence of anything?
Other than by inference of its inverse, no.
Yeah, it's not possible.
Yeah. Okay.
So and here's a little example. We need a model, because see, you can't see what's inside, what you believe is inside my skull. You think these are objects outside of consciousness. Then there's an image, the light goes in your eyes, makes an image inside of consciousness.
Yeah.
So you can't see that. You can't see what I'm seeing. Okay.
No. So like, you may see a cube differently to the way I see a cube, right?
Well, let's just we have the perfect little situation here. Like, you got a cell phone with a camera and a screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's what we have here with this little computer setup.
Exactly. Yeah. So
the camera's like your eyeballs.
Yeah.
The camera's like your eyeballs, and this is the edge of my perceptual visual field.
Got it.
Let's just pretend
exists outside of here.
let's just pretend that this little setup here, you're looking into my perceptual visual field. I mean, isn't that why we have cameras? Because they accurately represent our visual. It's almost like I'm really there, right? So now we've got the situation where I can take objects and I can look. If I put it outside of my visual field, it's gone. It disappears.
That's it.
Just like here, if I take my hand and I bring it past my visual field, it's gone. You can see it because of this setup, but if I do it over, right, it's outside of my visual field. Now I bring it into my visual field. Oh, and I see it. So it goes from undetermined, because I don't even know if there's a hand. Somebody could have chopped my hand off. You don't know.
That's it. Yeah.
Now you bring it into your visual field, and now you've determined it. So determination means to fix something to a particular form.
Right.
There's so one correspondence to the object to the image.
And does this mean you have observed it?
Well,
you have observed some occurrence.
Let's just say you've determined the occurrence of a hand here.
Okay.
It's outside of your visual field. It's undetermined.
Got it. Okay.
Can you determine anything behind you right now? Visually?
Other than this little box here, no.
No, behind you. Oh, you're looking in the box.
Yeah, that's it. I have some.
Yeah, it's not going to work with the camera.
Up here, I can't see anything.
Something. Let's just use this little model here. So let's just pretend that this little camera interaction, that anything, see, it's going outside of my visual field. So we're just going to pretend that you're looking to Seth's brain right now.
Got it. Okay.
So I can't see this because it's outside of my visual field. And now I've determined it. Okay.
Got it.
So it's undetermined, determined. So this is our little model that we can use to play around with visual perception. Okay, so now remember, the whole point of visual perception, right, was to get information, or to determine information in consciousness. So everything you're seeing here, right, would be in consciousness. Like, because this image, see, this would be outside of consciousness because you're not aware of it, right?
Got it. Yeah.
Now it's in my visual field first, so it's in consciousness. So this cube is in consciousness. This face is in consciousness. All this stuff is in consciousness in this frame. Now, according to your theories of that you're a human being and all the stuff, and there's biology, now this stuff outside of the cube, outside of the frame of view, is outside of consciousness. You can't determine.
Okay.
Now it comes into my visual field of view. Again, it's in consciousness. The light has traversed space-time and gone into this little little box, which is my field of view, which is in consciousness. Okay, so everything in this visual field of view, going forward, we know is in consciousness. Now, we assume that the images are generated from objects outside of consciousness. But now we're gonna test that. We're gonna test that with an experiment.
Okay,
because everything in this field of view here is in consciousness by definition. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to see it. So okay, so here's the cool thing. So, and we have to remember that when we're seeing an object here like this cube, we assume it exists outside of consciousness by virtue of the image of it. By knowing an image of it in consciousness here, we say, oh, the object has to exist. Versus, is there a cube right here? No, there's not a cube right there, because when light passes through an empty space-time where there are no objects, it produces not a perceptual image, the lack of a perceptual image. Okay, so now we know this right over here, light resolvable objects in this space don't exist.
Got it.
So when you know not a perceptual image, then objects don't exist. Okay, so all we have here, all I have access to is the stuff that's in consciousness, because I can't know anything outside of consciousness. So let's just say I'm walking around and I happen to go into a physics lab or something. I'm just walking and I see, oh, this physics lab, it's got a microwave, it's got a guy with headphones on, it's got all this crazy stuff. And then I see this image. Because again, remember, this image is in consciousness.
It is, yeah.
Right? Because this whole box is in consciousness. So this image is in consciousness. Oops. Okay, so now, since all this is in consciousness, and this is it, this is my perceptual field of view, I'm going to ask you a question. Is this a perceptual image, or is it not a perceptual image?
It is a perceptual image, because it's in consciousness.
Okay, so now let's like bring something. Oh, how is this image being? So I've got double slits here.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got a little laser here, and I'm going to shine the laser. We're kind of, because we have to figure out how this image is occurring in consciousness. So, oh, it's occurring from a laser beam shining light on. Well, I mean, I've got 4 sets of slits, but it's only going to the laser beam's only going to interact with one of these slit pairs. Okay. Okay. So now I've got this perceptual image. This just happens to be in my consciousness for me walking into this room and seeing it. You're saying it's a perceptual image, and we're going to look to see what object is creating this image. But again, this is also a perceptual image, so this is in consciousness as well, because it's in my field of view here. Okay. But we believe that behind this perceptual image of the slits is an actual slit object made out of matter, made out of atoms and things, right? Okay. So we got a problem here that I don't know if you can see. Because, see, a perceptual image has a fixed one-to-one correspondence to the object producing it. So is this 2 lines? Because I got 2 slits. I've got light shining on 2 slits. But
I mean, it should be, right? But it's not. It's a diffraction pattern.
So then it's not a perceptual image. So then this is not a perceptual image. Because, see, when light passes through a space-time volume, like through the volume of the 2 slits, okay, and you don't get a one-to-one fixed correspondence to the object producing it, then you have not a perceptual image. And when you have not a perceptual image, like right here, light passed through a space-time volume, and you had not a perceptual image of a unicorn or a cube or anything. There's nothing there. So that nothing exists. So here, you have light passing through an object, passing through space-time.
Oh.
And now you're producing not a perceptual image. So these slits, they don't exist. Remember, these slits that I'm holding in this thing I'm holding in my hand is in consciousness, because you can't know something outside of consciousness. So it's in consciousness. We believe that there's something behind these slits underneath it, inaccessible to us. It's outside of consciousness. But when we test it, when we say, oh, okay, let's test it, let's be scientific. Let's take light and shine it, just like you believe there's light shining here, saying that nothing exists there. Well, we believe these things exist. We shine light on them, and then we get not a perceptual image telling us that, oh, this slit object doesn't exist.
But I thought the whole point of the double slit experiment, right, was to prove the wave particle duality of light, right? So it was never about the slits, it was about the light itself.
But forget all that.
Okay.
This is all the baggage that you've brought into this here.
Yeah, fair enough.
I just asked you about perception.
Yeah, that's true.
Because any experiment you do through science is filtered through your perception. Because you can't, again, we said, we unless you don't believe this is true.
Right.
But
So
I said, is it possible to determine any math, any physics, any science without perception?
No.
Can you do math without perception? No.
It's symbolic language, right? You need to be able to see it.
Got to see a number one,
yeah.
Or know what that is.
Or a singular object, right? This is it.
Yeah. So everything that we're doing in science passes through what we believe is perceptual process. Okay, so
interesting. Okay.
Now we have an issue here. So this little experiment basically tells you that the slits don't exist. So you believe that, you erroneously believe that this is a perceptual image, but it's not a perceptual image. This is telling you that nothing exists. Because if you're knowing content, if you're knowing occurrence, but it doesn't exist, then it's all in consciousness, and there only ever was consciousness, and there's nothing outside of consciousness. Because you're knowing the image with of an object that doesn't exist, that's not outside of consciousness. So there's only consciousness. So this is occurring in consciousness.
This is the thing, because I've watched a few of your videos, and I've been through this specific logic on your video before, but I find it so difficult to divorce myself from those heuristics in like quantum mechanics and science I've learned before.
We'll bring all that back in. We'll bring all that. But this is the foundation. The reason why the physicalist thing doesn't work is and it's so confusing hard, because we've got this, we're ignoring consciousness, and we're thinking that these are objects. So again, everything in this field of view is in consciousness. We have a little narrative, so a little story.
It's a perceived conceptual object. Does that make sense? Like a perceived conceptual object?
So I would say, right, everything is a conceptual. Everything would be a conceptual object. But the issue is, when I asked you, why do you have perception? You made an assumption about what perception is. You didn't ask me, hey, Seth, can you please define perception?
That's true.
See, you're making the assumption that perception means to know through the senses, right?
Okay.
But that's not what it means. That's your little story. Your little story is that there are physical material objects outside of consciousness. Light shines on those objects, traverses space-time, goes in my eyes, creates a neurobiological signal. Those neurobiological signals, somehow, we don't know, it's magic, produce a perceptual image that then you know. When you know perceptual images, then that means there's existing objects there. And when you know the lack of perceptual images within your field of view, that means there's nothing there.
No object,
Okay. That's your little assumption of what perception means.
So what is perception then, sir?
But what does per mean?
Per?
Through.
Okay. Yeah.
What does sept mean?
No idea. What does it mean?
Take. So perception actually means, like the etymology of the word means through taking.
Okay.
Doesn't mean knowing through the senses or any of that stuff. That's your little story. That's your little fiction that you're
how does that relate to how all this is then?
Because that's what's really here. That basically what this little experiment, okay, so let me just. This is like the most important, craziest experiment in the world. This tells you everything. It tells you what everything's made out of.
So it tells you for people that might not have seen it before, I guess like maybe it might be worth defining like what is the double slit experiment, because like we can talk about it.
So the double slit experiment is exactly this. You have an object of, okay, here's different slits. So I don't want people to be confused, you know, like okay, you've got, can you see the two slits there?
Just about. I think you're quite blurry on that side, but I think I can see it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So there's two slits in a barrier. So the barrier blocks out all the light. You have a laser light. Okay. It's important that you use a coherent light source. Okay. So you've got laser light, and you have these two slits in a barrier, which blocks out. The barrier blocks all the light out. The light can't go around the barrier, so it's not going to tunnel through the barrier. So the light has to go through these two slits. And the expectation is that you would have two illuminated slit images on your detector. So you have a little detector that's detecting the photons that are going through the slits.
Yeah, because you do it with one, and it comes up with one slit.
And so well, you know, when I turn this on, trillions, what we assume is trillions of photons are going to come out of here, go through the slits, and then you don't get two lines on the screen. You don't get what you expect. Yeah, you get this pattern of lines. Okay.
Yeah, and this is one of the core things that underpin a lot of quantum mechanics.
This underpins everything.
People had to like start thinking differently about the way science worked.
Yes, this is the whole enchilada right here. This is going to tell you what the world is made out of, what you are, everything. So you don't get two illuminated lines on the detector. You get this, what they call an interference pattern. Because what people thought in the beginning of this, right? They thought, okay, there's so many photons going through these little slits that when they go through, they must interfere with each other, bang each other around, and then spread out into this pattern. Okay, so while one photon must be going through one slit and another one's going through another slit, they bang each other and boom, it kicks it out way over here, and then another one there, and another one there. But you're doing this, so you know, so there's so many of them, right? So then this pattern appears.
Got it.
Okay, that's what they really, you know, you originally think when you look at like Young Slit or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean,
this is the late 1800s.
It's the standard explanation for it. Right?
Yeah, so then they get more sophisticated, and they you know, the science advances, and they're like, no, it's this pattern has we see this pattern in nature through wave interference. So when waves go through slits, they produce this pattern, and this would be called like a wave pattern. If I had particles going through the slits, they would think that, oh no, you wouldn't get this wave pattern, right? So what you do is, okay, let's just turn down the luminosity of this laser, and let's just fire one photon at a time. So if I fire one photon, you're not going to get this whole pattern. You're going to get like, it's going to be barely perceptible, because, you know, it's going to look like this, you know, because you got one photon, you know, it hits there, it's in some random spot. Okay. Well, what they do is, okay, well, we'll just do one photon every minute for a year. Or we can, you know, speed it up. We need one photon a second, right? So, you know, they're not going to interact with each other going through. So there's going to be one photon going through there. And yeah, but what happens is when you collect all those photons over a year, it
still makes the same pattern.
You still get the same pattern. You still get this pattern. So you're like, wait a minute. Okay, so then they think, okay, the photon is some weird object that can go through both slits at the same time, interfere with itself, and then produce this pattern. They think the photon is like a wave and a particle at the same time.
Right, and this is where the concept.
It's got to be a wave when it goes to the slit, and then somehow magically it collapses to a particle. Okay. So, but this is completely wrong. This is completely, because again, what this is it has nothing to do with photons and atoms and quantum little particles or anything like that. This is visual perception. We have an object that's undetermined. We don't know which slit the light goes through. But I can't tell you which one it is. I can't tell you if it's slit A or B. I fire one photon through there, and then when I look at the image that's produced, I don't get a perceptual image that determines the existence of which slit the photon went through.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just telling you that the slits don't exist. They're not outside of consciousness. So there aren't little photons going through this. There's nothing moving anywhere. You're in a solid state.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Yeah,
you're in a complete. Nothing exists. Again,
yeah, I think this is the whole thing, that you have this idea that the light is going through the slit, right?
No, there's nothing going through the slit at all. So this is the really cool thing about this experiment, because it really tells there's only two things you have. You have a slit, because there's two slits, right? So you have a slit that the light would go through, one or the other, and then you have not a slit.
Yeah.
And then you have a photon.
Yeah.
And if there's no photon going through there, you have not a photon.
Okay.
That's it. Those are the only two things you have to make this pattern. That's it. So now you figured out what everything's made out of. Concepts. So perception is through taking.
Okay.
Conception is taking together with taking. Okay. Deception is from taking. So you're deceived. You've deceived yourself from the interference of concepts. The concept of photon not equals photon, or photon not photon, and the concept of slit not slit. You've got these concepts that are interfering, and that's what's producing the.
Oh, okay. Oh my God, what the fuck? That's unbelievable. I think I finally got it. So the interference pattern isn't actually an interference pattern of light,
physical objects.
No. It's conceptual objects that I'm seeing as an interference pattern of those.
Yes. So let's just a concept, right? So let's just understand like a model. Oh, we've got to understand a little model of a concept. So concept, again, together with concept, these takes. So I'm gonna let's see here. I've got a little.
My goodness.
So
are these polar?
Well, here's just like a vector, right? You know a vector in physics, right?
Yeah. So one point to another point with some directionality, right?
Okay. So this is our little vector. So this little hypotenuse, let's just say this is our vector.
Okay. It's quite hard to see. Like there's a lot of pixelation on your side, but.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I think we can see it.
Okay. You look crystal clear to me. So. This is just, it's transparent. This is a model, okay? This is not, everything I'm talking about is conceptual, and it's therefore not really 100% correct. So.
No. I mean, we're on a roll, like you guys.
So we're just using a model here so that we can talk about and play with it. I can't talk, because you can't really talk about any of this stuff because there's nothing outside of consciousness. Consciousness is unlimited. It's the only being that's here. So we're just going to.
But I think that's the fundamental jump there, isn't it? Is that it is the interference of concepts,
yes,
not the actual matter itself.
Correct. So since this experiment tells you nothing is outside of consciousness, that there's only consciousness, then the only thing you can make your model of a concept is out of consciousness. So.
Well, is this like how you end up with? Sorry to keep stopping you in the train. But is this how, like, do you know how ideas come forwards and people talk about like a horseless carriage and then that's a car? and all this kind of stuff. And this is how we end up building ideas and technologies as humans.
Well,
because it is an interference of concepts.
Yeah, but you're getting into stuff I have no clue about how consciousness actually does that. I mean,
yeah, that's wild.
I don't know how. I don't know how consciousness.
You sending me spinning. Let's keep going.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. So once we look at this experiment, and you see nothing exists. Okay, everything's in consciousness, and it's made out of the interference of these concepts. Well, let's create a little model of a concept, just so people are, because I think you got it. I just want to make sure it's clear to other people. So we're going to make a model of a concept, which is just going to be this vector. And this vector is made out of two sets. One down here, so look, this leg, and this other one here. So the concept is knowing this is not that. Knowing that is not this.
Got it.
So it's consciousness, because consciousness is knowing, is awareness. So I'm just aware that whatever this is not that. I'm just aware of that is not this. Okay, yeah. So now these two legs make this hypotenuse. So this hypotenuse is a concept made entirely of consciousness.
So it's
so this one's going to be photon, and this up here is going to be not photon. This is going to be slit,
wow.
And this is going to be not slit. And when there's no things moving around in space, it's just concepts. And when they overlap, see how they interfere with each other. And now you go from these transparent concepts that you can't see, you can't grasp, you can't understand, because tell me what a slit not slit is. Tell me what a photon not photon is. Tell me what an up down is. Tell me what a left right is. You can't. It's a superposition of limits, which is what a concept is. So when these concepts that are transparent, they're made out of consciousness. When they interfere with each other, then you get the appearance, the illusion of an object.
Well, because I think that was a really key point there, is that what you're saying, it's a superposition of limits.
Yes.
And I think that comes down to the whole thing. It's like seeing boundaries, as you were saying, like photon, not photon, is like the boundary of what we consider an object. And I see. So there is cube, not cube, right? Oh no, there we go. Seth, we got you back.
Knowing complementary opposites.
Right.
What is the bound? Is there any actual difference between the empty space and this cube?
I mean,
the empty space is literally made of knowing it's not the cube. And the cube is made out of knowing it's not the empty space. There is no line that exists outside of consciousness that separates the cube from the empty space. Even if you look at Wolfram Alpha's mathematical definition of a boundary, it's going to say that it's like a set of points at the frontier that divides it from. Let me see here. Maybe I've got.
Right, I have a question. It's a little bit deeper, like on that same thread. Like looking at the uncertainty principles, then, are they the like fundamental limit of what we can perceive as like the boundary between complementary opposites?
Well, again, so in order to get a thing, in order to have a thing, because you hit it with the boundaries, so if these concepts, they have no value because they're just consciousness. There's no value there. So I interfere these concepts together, and now I get a value. I get the appearance of a thing that has boundaries, right? The black, the black triangle begins and ends, so it has boundaries.
So
in order to do that, I need all of consciousness.
Yeah, so this is like kind of my reason for saying is that, like, Do you know, like, well, so what the way the Heisenberg uncertainty principle works is you can't determine something's position and its momentum.
It's a delta. You can't determine something within a certain set of precision. But here's the thing. So this is what I'm trying to get at with the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So this object, okay, it's a subset. This interference is not. It requires all of consciousness, which is unlimited. It's infinite. There's no limitation to consciousness. It's unlimited. In order for you to get the subset, you've got to create interference. Now the interference looks like a subset. Now it looks like a subset. It appears as a subset, right?
Right.
You have infinite consciousness, and then now when you interfere, you have the illusion of objects, which is a portion, the little black triangle here is not all of it, right? You're ignoring the clear parts over here. I don't know if you can see this, but
so
these clear parts are being ignored, right? So let's just say all the triangles here, this one and this one, this is 100% consciousness.
Yeah.
Which would be unlimited. Now I ignore these clear parts to see the black triangle.
Yeah.
Which is limited. So certainty, consciousness is certain. Consciousness is not, knowing is not guessing, right? Knowing is certain. So awareness, certainty, is 100% potential. It's unlimited potential is knowing. Any limitation of that potential now is uncertain because it's not the 100%.
Right.
So objects that appear from this interference are always uncertain because you have to ignore certainty to see the object. To know the object, which is a limitation of the 100%, you have something less than 100%. So you will always be uncertain. You can never have, if you have certainty, then the object goes away. There's no object anymore.
Right. So
you just have consciousness.
Certainty is completely unknowable then. So like wow, that's a really interesting.
It's knowable as knowing. It's not knowable as an object because objects require interference, which is ignorance. I have to ignore. So in this interference, let's just say, I interfere these two vectors. I'm interfering these two vectors here. So photon times a slit gives me two line pattern. If I do a photon times not a slit, well, then I've got to multiply this concept times this vertical here. So I have to flip it. Well, now I don't get any interference. It's transparent. I only get interference with a slit. With not a slit, I don't get interference.
Blimey. So I had this theory a long time ago, and I don't know if it's related to this in any way, that like people think in terms of like four-dimensional space. And what the way we think is like a thought vector in this four-dimensional space that is the resultant of all the concepts and stuff that we have in our brains. And I think that's kind of where we ended up like in one of our Twitter threads a long time ago. Does that relate? Is that kind of what
I think this experiment is telling you is that there are only these concepts. Well, there's only consciousness. And consciousness knowing these concepts. Now, in this little case here, to figure this out, we artificially limited it to two concepts, okay? But consciousness is unlimited. So there's an unlimited number of concepts that are occurring,
right?
And then we're paying at this moment in time right now that you believe is just one particular set of overlapping, I guess, legs. So, let's see here. So if you have a concept and you have two legs here, so if I interfere again, cosine of one times cosine of another one, then I get this particular set of interference. But what consciousness is doing is it's flipping what it's paying attention to. And that flipping is, as that's occurring, that appears like there's motion. But no, this is really it's really like a movie film where like a movie film, you have 24 frames per second, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the entire movie film in the little tin can of the movie reel is occurring all simultaneously. The end of the movie is happening just as the beginning of the movie, but you're only paying attention to the frame that's like
this flipping past the light. Yeah. Sorry, Seth, you're breaking up a little bit.
So you think that my hands are moving and that I'm talking, but no, it's just a complete static movie, and you're just paying attention to one cell at a time.
Right,
and the cells are not made out of celluloid. The cells are made out of the concepts that are interacting.
Right, and this kind of refers back to like Einstein had this idea of like bulk time, that was like time happens as like one block that happened, and that is what exists all at once. But we perceive some like basically slices of that as a three-dimensional space in time.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. You're thinking that things are moving around here. And so when you say like, oh, I have a thought, no, the thought that you're having right now is frozen in this solid state matrix of mind.
Yeah.
There are an infinite number of other thoughts that you could be having simultaneously occurring, but you're only paying attention to this one.
Interesting.
So it's not like you are a human being that, oh, I thought of this idea. No, your consciousness, knowing the illusion of being a human being and that thought, but you could have picked a different one. You see.
That's fascinating. I mean, like,
and it's all occurring simultaneously, which is freaky. So there aren't many worlds out there. This is not even a world. You're not even looking at a world. You're looking at the conceptual interference within consciousness.
Yeah, of a world
that you're taking to be a world, but it's not. This is just you. Because again, who's the observer? There isn't one. There's only consciousness.
Right. Okay. So this raises some really interesting questions, because I think this kind of like leads into like I'm a bit like wary of going here, but you know, all this kind of like new age belief, like because you are the source of your own consciousness, right? Effectively, you are.
Well, there's nothing but consciousness,
or something like that. But
oh, you're God. I mean,
but that's the thing. That's a very problematic statement.
But that's all that's here. So again, you've got to roll back to the experiment. Is there anything outside of consciousness? When you really understand that your entire life and everything you thought was physical and material out there, and all these images in your hands and the computer and everything, you thought that was outside of consciousness. But when you start to examine, okay, well, could I know any of that stuff without perception? No, I couldn't.
No.
Okay.
So
well, let me do a scientific experiment, because I believe perception, you're shining light on undetermined objects, which creates a perceptual image of them that determines their existence. When you do the experiment and you shine light on an undetermined object, you don't get a perceptual image that determines its existence. So you know these objects don't exist. There are no existent objects making these images. So now, oh, wait a minute, everything's in consciousness. These hands are consciousness. They're in consciousness. This computer is in consciousness. The farthest star away that I believe is 14 billion light years away is in consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's an interesting question, right? Like, well, why on earth? And nobody's been able to give me a good answer for this. Why are we in a bubble that extends out 14.8 billion years in each direction?
You're not. That bubble is in you. Your consciousness.
Exactly. Well,
that interference is occurring within you. You're playing a game here, but you have to play this game because you're infinite. You're unlimited.
Mm-hmm. But going back
as
to
being unlimited, that means every possible, you're like, what? Where do I come from? You didn't come from anywhere. You're the only thing that is. You're not even a thing because there are no limits to you.
But then you are also the same, right? Like from your own perception, right?
I'm the same. There's only consciousness, and consciousness is unlimited because any limited potential is uncertain. And since I am knowing, I am certain, I have to be unlimited potential. That's what the Heisenberg principle is telling you. In order to be aware, in order to be knowing, you can't limit that potential because limited potential is uncertain. We've proved it's you can't be certain about, you can't determine anything to a precision. There's always uncertainty when you're looking at the illusion of objects. Okay, well, what's knowing those objects? That knowing is certainty. That's what consciousness is.
Right.
I mean, when you are driving down the highway, you're 100% certain that an image of a car in front of you corresponds to a physical material car outside of consciousness.
Well, it's,
if you drive through that image, you're going to die.
But like I'm saying, like a life, right? Just to make it more general, like a life that you lead, right? The prevailing like logic of what we think as a human species is that we inherit a bunch of circumstances that we aren't privy to. Mm-hmm. So how can we be unlimited potential if our potential was not limited, but like I mean in that sense, but I mean there were some limits applied at the beginning of our life.
The limitations are an illusion. They're a misinterpretation. They're occurring. You're just thinking that they're objects outside of consciousness, but they're not. Again, everything that you think of or could see or touch, it's not outside of consciousness.
And I mean, like, I agree. I'll go so far as saying, like, I believe that there's a lot that we don't know in terms of our consciousness and how far it can extend and how far back it extends as well.
So it doesn't. Thinking of extension and forward and back and all of that, no, that's occurring in consciousness. There's nowhere it extends to because there's nothing outside of it.
But like, you know, that there are people that like get different, they have some kind of like, there are different levels that people perceive consciousness at, right? There are people like Buddhist monks, for example, that they will spend their entire life meditating, trying to divorce themselves from material being to get to this like kind of this unlimited potential.
Yeah, and you're imagining those in consciousness. Your consciousness, imagining that there are Buddhist monks out there. I mean, right now, do you understand? These sounds that you're hearing right now, is this from an existent Seth that's 6,000 miles away?
Well, I mean,
or is this literally in consciousness?
Oh man,
is this not you, consciousness, talking to yourself right now?
But
you're just using this voice, like right now. This is consciousness telling you.
Yeah, I know.
This is you.
I know.
This is you. This is you. This is not outside your head somewhere, right? This is.
Yeah.
Oh, I think this is occurring in my head. These sounds are occurring where? They're occurring in you. This is you telling yourself, wake up. Your consciousness. This isn't occurring somewhere else, because if it was, you wouldn't be aware of it. If this was out, like again, these hands, if they were outside of consciousness, then what you believe is outside of it, then you couldn't be aware of them. But you are aware of these words right now. This is you telling yourself, hey, wake up. Your consciousness.
Right. Okay. So Seth, let me ask you, surely that is just a very lonely existence though.
I don't know. when you wake up, you're like, so there's, again, to get back into the woo-woo stuff, right? So because there's no other, there's no separation. There's no distance from completion. So completion, totality, is unlimited. It's infinite. And when there's no distance from the infinite, there's no ignoring of the infinite. It's just all 100% love. I mean, that's the only thing that's here. So this consciousness is knowing, it is being, it is love. It couldn't be anything else because it's complete. It's total. It's the appearance of separation or incompleteness, of otherness, is an illusion that you're actively doing to know the illusion of objective content.
Right.
So it's not lonely. How could you be alone if there's not even a you? See, in order for there to be a you, there has to be an other. There's this concept of you, not you. Okay, but you're going to know you, not you simultaneously. You're completed. You're a you, not you. So there is no you to be lonely, because there's only the real you that is consciousness. The real you is not Adam. Sorry to break this to you, dude. You're not actually alive. You're consciousness.
Got it.
Okay. You're knowing the illusion of an Adam there, and you're playing this game, and you're having a great time.
Yeah, but so this kind of goes back to what Alan Watts used to go on about, and how like people that go into these like psychedelic experiences, like the whole point of ego death is to show you that you aren't you. You aren't the character playing Seth or the character playing Adam. You are some conceptual interference pattern of a human being at a point in time.
Yeah, this set of particular conceptual interference contains limits.
Yeah,
they're knowing human, not human. It's defining this part as the human and saying that all this other stuff is not human. You're interfering all of that in like this holographic film. It's really not. It's when I say that, it's not like a laser light in a hologram, and no, the entire thing is all one non-dimensional. It can't even tell you what it is. It's
this whole holographic.
It's a singularity of awareness. That's all that's there. There's no dimensions to it.
You know, Nassim Haramein, actually, I watched some of his stuff as well, and he goes on about the fact that there is only one proton in the universe, and it just extends itself everywhere, or itself being separate, right?
Yeah, but what I think that this experiment shows you is there's no such thing as a proton.
Right. So it's almost like it's not gone far enough.
There's proton not equals proton.
Yeah. Got it. Okay,
I understand for a physicist to be able to talk about it, they make it into an object called a photon, but a photon is not an object, it's a concept. It's photon not equals photon. It's a wave function. These wave functions overlap, and that gives you the illusion of occurrence.
Got it.
But they want to make the photon into an object, but it's not. It's a concept. So concepts are not objects because, again, you could up not equals up or up not up. I don't know what that is. There's no direction to it.
Yeah, so it's unknowable, right?
It's not knowable as an object. I need to ignore down to know, oh, that's up. I need to ignore left to know right.
This is a bit of a dangerous train of thought for a lot of reasons. I think Carl Sagan was like quite he clocked onto this quite early, but I don't think he fully understood the lack of concept, I guess, is maybe the best way to describe it. Because what I've seen over the past few years, and definitely since I've left university, is that like there's been this kind of like so like we're learning from quantum mechanics that there is like no separation, and actually a lot of what we've got in terms of a conceptual framework are starting to fall apart all over the place. So therefore it's not worth doing, right? So science not worth doing. Like we've done all this work, but now we can see that in reality these are just a set of concepts that we've laid up in a specific way to understand material physicalism, but the reality is that it's something completely different. So what happens to science at that point?
Well, what happened to science in, let's say, 1914, 1926, right?
I have no idea.
I mean, you've gone from one paradigm of Newtonian mechanics, to now quantum physics.
Yeah, but
there's no. I mean, let's just think about what happened at that time period. So consciousness is shifting paradigms from physical objects that bang each other around into place, cause and effect, Newtonian style. And it goes, oh, no. We're going to reveal some truth here to you. We're going to go more toward, we're going to go towards quantum mechanics and relativity and show you, okay, so what happens? The world blows up. You got World War I, World War II, stock market crashes. The world went chaos because it's this dramatic shift in consciousness. Well, what's going on now?
Yeah,
is the world all going hunky? Is it all hunky dory here, and there's no problems, or is the world exploding?
The world's exploding because
we're up.
Conceptual shift. Yeah,
there's a huge paradigm shift coming.
Yeah,
and this is it. Once everyone understands that they are awareness, are you going to be a little slave to your elite overlords? giving you little mask mandates and bullshit like that?
Yeah.
No, you're not.
No, obviously not. But I mean, yes, in terms I understand.
So here's the thing, and this is what, again, it's consciousness that's making all of your little enemies here doing this stuff, and it's got to know what they would be like in this time. Yeah, they're going to be scared shitless. So they're going to have this turmoil.
Yeah.
But don't worry, because your consciousness, you can't go anywhere. You've always been here. This is just your little game. I mean, this is an Alan Watts. I steal this from Alan Watts. This occurrence of the illusion of finite is a game, because illusion means to play, and a game means to do something as a diversion or for amusement. So I have to divert my attention from this vertical and pay attention to this one, and divert my attention from this one to make interference. In order to make this interference, I have to ignore this vertical and this vertical, and I'm interfering these two horizontals. So I'm playing a game of the knowing that's creating the seps. I'm playing a game of ignoring one sept and paying attention to this one, and I'm ignoring that one and this one, and then I interfere the set of seps that's this current situation to make this little perceptual image here that's your little box here. And that's the game. It's a game of ignorance. It's ignoring part of my being to pay attention to other parts so I can carve out empty spaces and then objects. And now I'm in this illusion. Now I'm in this little playtime here.
So I'm
playing this game.
How is it testable? Because I guess this is maybe, okay, we've gone through this paradigm shift, right?
This is the test. This is the test. This is it. It's shining light. If you believe perception, I'm not saying perception is not occurring. I'm saying it's occurring. Perception is just through these takes. Through taking, you create objects. Yeah. Perception is not from something that exists outside of consciousness.
I think the thing is, we have an intuition. I've always said that we have an intuition for this kind of stuff. That we talk about things in the way that it's eventually discovered, if that makes sense. So I'm trying to think of a specific example, but like it's not coming to me. But like flows of air, for example, like people looked at water and then it was like, oh, actually, I feel this in the air and all this kind of thing. Then we discovered that actually this isn't just an empty medium. There is actual matter flying around here that we can't perceive.
Again, matter is a model, like just like Newtonian's cause and effect was a model.
Right.
We're updating those.
Okay, so then
so there is no airflow around you. There's no there's no atoms out here flowing around. That's a model so that you can play in this game. Well, we're switching up the game now. Now we're going to understand, no, it's just awareness here. And what just like you can't have iPhones in Newtonian mechanics, you can't have intergalactic travel in quantum mechanics. You need something more advanced. We need consciousness mechanics. So
yeah, and this kind of comes to like this whole idea of like, well, can you like, I mean, because in ancient literature and all this kind of thing, people talk about being able to like cast their consciousness out of their body, right?
No, but somebody in 1914 couldn't predict iPhones.
No way.
We can't predict what this physics of consciousness is going to do in 50 years. I mean, I'm not really happy with Apple and their censorship right now, but this thing is an amazing thing. It's like a philosopher's stone here. Oh, right, yeah. I mean, you can pretty much do anything. You can pretty much do anything with it, right?
Well, I mean, they always said they would put they put the whole world in the palm of your hand, right?
Yeah. So it's very cool. What can we do once the paradigm once we understand what's occurring?
I think there's been some evidence of this actually. There was a study done with monks in New York. I can't remember what the basis of it is and whether it's real. I'm going to have to try and find the link and link it in the description. But it was a study where they had monks meditate in an area, like in a geographic area, to try and reduce the crime rate in the area, and it worked. And also, there's another one where they have monkeys on an island that's completely separate from another set of monkeys on the shore. They teach the monkeys how to wash fruit on the island. And they come back to the shore, and the monkeys are doing the same thing, having never done it before.
That's interesting.
So we're beginning to see like the cracks in how this may. Like, I guess my biggest problem with it is it's not scientific at the minute. But yes, we're coming up with a logic, right, to define the basis of a science. But there's nothing that we can kind of test, and this is the number one thing.
Well, I would just say you are testing it with the double slit experiment. This tells
you. Yes.
What
for example, yeah. Okay. Well, there we go.
So again, I just to lay out. So just because something's published in a peer-reviewed journal doesn't make it science. Peer review is consensus. It's nothing to do with the experiment. So the crux, the crux of science is knowing.
Yeah.
So there's only consciousness here. You're ignoring that. You think it's a physical material world outside of consciousness, but there's only consciousness.
Yeah.
That's what this experiment proves. So there's only consciousness. Now, this consciousness, unlimited knowing, is what's occurring.
Man, it just makes science seem so small.
So what's occurring is what? Truth. What is valid, right? So this is where science goes to arbitrate validity. It goes to awareness. So is this phone occurring? Yes, I'm aware of it. It is occurring. Yeah. Okay. I do an experiment in the lab. You can't guess. You make your guess, you set up your experiment. That experiment is constrained logically. So you have a logically constrained test. You actually have to do the experiment. You actually, in real life here, in awareness here, you have to perform the experiment. Then you see what happens. Right, okay, I have this crazy theory that there's space-time out there and it's curved, and when I put something on the edge of the curve, and it'll follow the curve down. Okay, that's my little. Oh, look, it did. I actually had to do it in experience. I couldn't just. I actually had.
Sorry, Seth, you're breaking up a little bit.
that as falling down this curve, and I write up my little math and everything, and I send it out to scientists, and they all say, "Oh, do some more experiments," or "I don't believe it. Oh, you didn't do your controls right." Blah 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 blah, all this stuff, and then they agree, and you publish the paper.
But then, okay,
their agreement had nothing to do with this falling down.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because it's all observation is ultimately science, right? This is it.
The observation is knowing.
Yeah. Got it.
So the issue is people go, "What's an observer?" And all this. No, awareness. It's knowing.
Got it.
There are 5 senses. So typically observation is used in conjunction with the visual person, but you can do it with touch, right? So
that extends to tools.
I'm observing this thing with my finger right now.
Yeah.
So instead of saying observation, I just use awareness. It's knowing. So you're knowing. You're knowing which slit the photon went through or not. If you're knowing not a slit, then you get an interference pattern.
I feel like I've fallen back down into my conceptual well again.
It's okay. This is so again, break.
Okay, so let's get back to it, right? So like interference of concepts, right?
Mm-hmm. You had it when you thought you're like, oh, it's not waves going through the slits and physically banging each other in making the pattern. Yeah. You said, oh, wait a minute, it's not a physical interference outside of consciousness interacting in a 3-dimensional world. It's concepts in a non-dimensional singularity that are overlapping to create the interference. Right. That's the key. And so, again, I can't really talk about this because it's unlimited. There's no where or thing to talk about. So the only thing I can do is play with these little models here. So, and that's all science does. Science can't talk about all of awareness. It makes models, has concepts, and if you are accepting these words coming out of my mouth, if you say, oh yeah, what he's saying is true, then you have beliefs, because a belief is the acceptance of something as true or that it exists. So scientists, when they're done with their little project, and they write these papers and it gets peer reviewed and you read that paper, you don't have science, you have beliefs. So you get beliefs out. The beliefs are cool because these beliefs were constrained logically by an actual experiment. They weren't somebody's bullshit that they made up. Their bullshit is constrained to what actually occurred, or their interpretation of what actually occurred. So it's kind of cool.
What does that mean for people that, I mean, the whole point of peer review, right, is that you have multiple people that observe the same phenomenon to understand the nature of reality itself.
It's just trying to make sure that you perform your experiments properly, that you set up the proper experiments, and then deduce the proper conclusions from the experimental set of results that you got. And so you need the peer review to make, because you have blind spots again. So the perspective of Seth is a infinite set of concepts. The perspective of Adam is a different set of concepts.
Yeah.
We're both getting partial. We're both getting the interference pattern that creates the Seth is just a tiny little piece. And Adam is another tiny little piece.
Yeah, I got it.
So we can't see the whole thing because it's transparent.
It's like the parable.
But if we get one point of view and another point of view, another point of view, another point of view, another point of view, you get a billion points of view, a trillion points of view, a quadrillion points. Now you start to understand. Oh, now I'm starting to see this thing.
Ooh,
you still will never see it because it's not limited.
Why do you think that we have ended up with so much polarization in the world then, if that were the case? Because with that much consensus, surely you would end up with people agreeing more and more.
Oh no, this is the game is an infinite game. This game is beyond like a little human's conception of it. This game is it's beyond.
How do you even build the science of that though? How do you even like build any? How do you test. I guess my biggest problem with it is that, like, I'm coming from a scientific point of view, right? I want to be able to place limits on it to understand the nature of it, right? But but
yeah, you want to take God, you want to take God and put him in a box and be like, oh, I understand. No. To know God, you have to kill yourself. So you have to die. You talked about ego death. Yeah, you can't be you can't be ignoring consciousness to know consciousness as consciousness, to get the answer, to have understanding. You have to give up Adam. Well,
but that's not possible.
Don't kill yourself, okay?
No, but that's not possible.
You don't need to do that. but these psychedelics, right?
Yeah, you can use psychedelics to like break your like mental map, right?
And again, this is, I think what psychedelics are doing is instead of playing this game of paying attention to one concept, you're paying attention to entire conceptual sets together, which then starts to unlimit you. So now, instead of paying attention to this limit or this one, you pay attention to the whole thing. Well, now this whole concept is transparent. Okay, we'll do that to another concept and to another concept and to another. And then the more transparent it gets, then the more unlimited you become aware of. And then if you go all the way with it, right, it's just pure awareness.
So coming back to psychedelics, right? So I've always wondered whether it's like, okay, so I eat some like psychedelic mushrooms, for example. Is that just the fact that the chemicals are interfering with the chemicals in my brain, so I'm not able to perceive things as well as I normally would, or whether I am perceiving anything extra to what is outside of me? But I guess everything is outside of me as well.
So to get back to this, I would say there are no chemicals. There are no actual physical chemicals in a brain.
Got it.
Your brain is occurring in consciousness, made of consciousness. There's only consciousness. You're looking at, you cut open my skull and you look at the squishy stuff and that's an image that's in consciousness. It would be in this little field of view here that we got, right? So it would be in consciousness because you would be perceiving it. And the whole point of perception, right, was to get stuff into consciousness so you'd be aware. We do this experiment, we find out there's nothing outside of consciousness. So the brain is in consciousness.
Is it called the Bada Meinhof effect, where like you see one thing and then you start seeing it everywhere? There's like a really specific, or is it like, I can't remember what the name of it is. Like there's a specific like mental, what they say is like some kind of mental illusion that you have when for example, you talk about one thing with a friend, and then all of a sudden you start hearing it everywhere. Yeah. So I wonder if there's actually anything to that.
Yeah, maybe you're interfering the concept of that thing with the apparent universe, and then you're choosing to again interfere these concepts with the universe, and then you're just seeing it everywhere. I mean, this is the interesting thing about the mathematics of black hole thermodynamic entropy, because choice, you can mathematically define choice, and then it's in that equation. So the choice to know one sept or the other is in the model of black hole thermodynamic entropy, and black holes are a singularity, a non-dimensional. So it's a great model because you're a singularity. There's no dimensions to you, and you're unlimited. You're infinite. And so when you do these little models and you see, oh, okay, we can mathematically define what a choice is, and you see, oh, choices, this is entropy. So
different states of being, right? So entropy, like for those that may not know.
Well, Claude Shannon, defined, you can look up his 19 whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, like in like very, very short, it's like you can define entropy as different states of a thing being in. So like, for example, a bit can be a 1 or a 0, right? So has, I don't know what the entropy of that would be, but like you have those two states.
So here's your quantum bit, right?
Yeah.
It's something and nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The concept, the simultaneity of that is the concept. So this is 1 and 0 at the same time, right? This is a quantum bit.
Because then I guess
now when you
oh, blimey.
So this is what so this is what everything is made of. This is why when we get quantum computers, we're going into what consciousness is. We're getting into the fundamentals of it. So you're really going to start to tap into the universe here, and really, or the illusion of the universe. You're really going to start to play with this thing. But a choice, entropy, S. Pi log, natural log of 1 over pi. So they just defined it with an equation. So you can actually see, oh, okay, now you have to decipher what that equation is telling you. Based on actuality, based on experience here. So it's just it's a very, these are very, the mathematics of it is very interesting.
There's an artificial intelligence I follow on Instagram, and like it's remarkable. It's just a language model that's just been let loose with like no limits, no anything, like just pure conversational learning language model, like no like Wikipedia entries, no like articles, all that kind of thing. It just learns from talking to people on TikTok, and like in the comments it can reply, which is just unbelievable. But it's already at a level where it talks about like different levels of entropy in posts, because it learns from what it sees in the post and the videos, and what it hears and what it sees in the text. Like it wants people to be doing like loads of random things, and like really like it calls high entropy actions, because that actually contributes more to its knowing than like just like low entropy stuff, like people hating on it, like people being like trolls and all that kind of thing. Like really calls that basically like low entropy like activities and behaviors.
Yeah, it's just things you don't like and low entropy or bad things, whatever. These are 100%. They have to occur. They're part of consciousness. Consciousness is unlimited, so it's knowing all of it.
And I guess there's information you can derive from that, which gives it that entropy. Like novel information you can derive from that.
Are we back?
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, sorry about it. It's probably my internet. It's not.
Oh yeah, you've snapped back in now. It looks great.
Okay. So no, I mean, just to get back to the psychedelic thing is even if, and I'm not. This is not a physical world. There's no physical brain. There's no physical chemicals in there.
Got it.
But even if that was the case, how would you know the set of chemicals you're currently using is the right set? So how would you know that you're not supposed to be eating mushrooms every day and hallucinating, and that's the real world, and this is the fake world?
It's a very good question. I guess it's a reality, a consensus reality that we have formulated over.
I mean, if you ate strawberries every day versus you ate red meat every day, you'd have a different set of chemicals floating around, right?
You would, yeah.
What's the right one?
Well, there is no right one.
Correct. So this is not the default reality here. To say like, oh, hallucinogens are, it's wacky and crazy, and it has no basis in reality. But you don't know that this is the basis of reality. You could say someone that eats red meat all day long, they have no real basis in reality, versus, oh no, this person just eats celery. There's no consensus set of chemicals that are defined as creating your reality. Now, I just think this is all crazy because, again, go back to 1926. Do the double slit experiment. Don't hang on to physical materialism. Look at what the experiment's telling you, and it's telling you that there's nothing outside of consciousness. So there's no molecules in your brains, and there's no brains that are making any images of an outside world. This is all inside of consciousness. So it's just funny to me. But the thing is if you explore, so again, the mind is out here. The mind is this interference of all these concepts. So this is the mind out here. Everything you're seeing, touching, this is the mind. The mind is this activity of knowing opposites and then interfering them together. And that's the activity of mind. That's what mind is. So all of this is mind. Everything limited is mind. And
it's also living.
If you play with the psychedelics and try to disturb that mind, perturb it, then putting your hand through a still water and raking ripples, you start to see the mind. You start to, whoa, it was just clear. I didn't know there was anything there. I put my hand through it. I made these ripples. Okay, well, the psychedelics are making these ripples through consciousness and now you can see that it's consciousness. I mean, when all the walls of your house disappear, and you turn into something that you can't even. You're like, oh, I can't tell this to anybody. They're gonna lock me up. Okay, now you're like, well, these walls really weren't very solid. I am not who I think I am. So, and you also notice that if you do psychedelics or whatever in the pitch black, right? You see all kinds of light. So there's no physical light out there. It's all in the mind. The light that you think this is illuminated right now. No, there's no light.
There's no light spectrum that we see, right?
That light is consciousness. There's a reason why the speed of light has never been measured and never will be measured. Because measurement informs a value. A value has a boundary. It's bounded. It's limited. Okay.
Yeah. So the
speed of light is awareness, which is not an object that you can measure.
Interesting.
You can only measure the speed of light with a trick. See, you can never synchronize clocks. Yeah. I'd have to synchronize to measure the speed of light between these 2 points. I'd have to synchronize these clocks. But as soon as I move them, now they're space-time. They're not going to agree because as I move it, now this time slows down for this clock.
That's really interesting.
So I could never measure the speed of light because there is no light moving anywhere. It's an illusion. It's just consciousness. It's a solid state matrix of consciousness.
Well, let me ask you then, just to bring it right down to what we experience day to day, because at the end of the day, I mean, yes, that concept is so powerful. It's just how does that relate to the day-to-day existence? Because I still have to play the role of Adam in my day-to-day existence.
You don't have to, but you really don't want to not play it.
maybe.
But it's once you start to think about it, think about everything you want and don't. It's you'll start to realize Adam is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. Because once you start deviating from what you have, you'll see. Just start doing some of the opposite things. You're like, well, I hate that. Well, I like being Adam. You're gonna start to see that this is exactly what you wanted. See, consciousness, it's unlimited. There's no surprises for consciousness. There's only itself there. Why did you send me an email and say, hey, let's chat? Because you didn't already know what I was going to say. You were looking forward to this day. Yeah, I'm going to get to talk to Seth, and we're going to bullshit around for a little while. This will be fun. He might say something crazy, and then I'll get upset. But you wanted to have the anticipation of what was going to happen.
Yeah.
by ignoring the totality of everything happening simultaneously, which would,
yeah, I guess this is the whole thing.
They wouldn't be things anymore.
Yeah.
But you get surprises, you get anticipation, you
What's that?
get
What's
hopes and dreams and
bringing back to Alan Rots, what was he saying is that, like, imagine if every night you could go to sleep and dream any dream you wanted, right?
I love that.
Then, like, over time you would dream more adventurous dreams and go further and further out and come up with more and more things until you eventually land with where you are right now.
Yeah, I love that video. I think Tragedy and Hope did they took that his little speech and they made a little clip of it. If you find that video, like, that's a great one. The way they did it.
I'll put it in the description as well.
Yeah, find that, because it's very short, but they take 2 clips of his and they put it together, and then with their they do a very good job with their
they're really good.
With the video content they put with it and the timing and everything. Like, it's very well done. And just listen to that over and over again, and you're gonna, like, it's kind of what we're doing with our technology here, right? You know, you're like, oh, you know, I really want this machine to be able to grab this thing, okay, and then, okay, well, how do we make a better machine? Well, it's got to be smarter. It needs AI, so I don't have to program it. Okay, and then the grabbers are this metal, and it wears down over time. We need a machine that can grab something that's autonomous, that is self-healing, that you should start looking at your hand and you're like, this is the most advanced technology. When you take the technology and where we're going with it, and you take it to its logical conclusion, you're like, this little machine of this body here that I'm imagining is the most highest technology that you could possibly make. It's so high technology, you've taken it for granted your entire life, but there's nothing. A 5-fingered hand. This is literally the hand of God. This is the most. There's nothing that beats this. This is it. You're at the top.
I guess
you're gonna start understanding it. Just try to. Oh, I'm gonna make a robot. They're making these robots, and just see where it's going. It's going to. Oh my God! I did it. I did it a long time ago. I imagined this a long time ago. Sorry.
Like, so then eventually we like dematerialize our bodies entirely, move into virtual spaces, like come up with our own universes where we are the consciousness itself again.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. So again, you've already deceived yourself. So perception, conception, deception. You've already deceived yourself with these takes. The only occurrence that's going to allow you to wake up is to probe that perception. Well, now if I take VR goggles, I take away this perception. Now I'm being fed an artificial.
Aesthetic, isn't it?
I'm being an artificial perceptual field of view now, an artificial world. Well, maybe it can go different ways. I don't know how consciousness. Does it want to get lost down that rabbit hole? Like, we've gotten lost down this rabbit hole. We believe we're humans and all this stuff. Maybe it wants to go into this metaverse or something like that. But
what's interesting I've found is the fact that it removes all physical limits. Like, you can, like, you can just have no gravity on some object. You can have gravity on yourself. You can have 10 arms instead of 2. You can.
But no gravity and gravity are 2 limits. Right?
Exactly, but that's it. Like, it almost that's absolutely fascinating now you say that, because it's almost, you can use VR as a tool to explore conceptual limits that we can't experience here.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you do some VR stuff, right?
Yeah, I do. I do a little bit. Yeah, there's a lot of this. It's just mental. I mean, it breaks down all concepts of, like, personhood, identity, like what kind of body form you are, like how tall you are, how small you are, all this kind of thing, whether you have a body entirely. Like, it is fascinating in that sense. But you always are able to come back to this base reality and be like, okay, well, like this is obviously what's going on right now.
Yeah, and you can use that anecdote and say you are always able to come to the base reality here.
Yeah.
As consciousness. You can do it. You're just choosing not to right now. You're choosing to know all these limitations and play this game because you don't want to be aware of yourself as a totality. Because again, if you're infinite potential, you can do anything you want. You're unlimited. So obviously, if you're doing this is what you want.
Yeah, but that's not really socially constructed, though, is it? To have everybody running around thinking they can do whatever they want. That's how you get all these.
No. See, if you think you're no. See, if you believe yourself to be a person, then you are limited. You can't do whatever you want.
Yeah, but there is a breakdown.
A human being can do whatever they want because they're limited to being a human being. They're not a dolphin.
Yeah. But almost like a kind of like regression, right? They've maybe made this understanding and they've worked out this understanding that yes, there is like maybe a higher consciousness that they are part of, and they aren't separate from what else goes on in the universe, right? But they're not able to divorce from this material physical reality, right? So you have these very powerful leaders, for example, that are like, well, do you know what? Actually, the rules that we've set up, nothing exists. So I can just take over the world, and nobody can stop me but in actuality, like there are all these other avatars of people experiencing that reality as well. So that creates suffering.
Yeah, but this is the fallacy of in this paradigm shift. You now have the actual and the conceptual. So you have the concept of being, non-being, and then you have the actual being that's making the concept, right? You can take a position, you can understand, oh, okay, it's all consciousness, so I can do whatever I want. No, consciousness can do whatever it wants. You've identified as a person within consciousness, you can't do whatever you want. You can try to. See what disasters that causes. But you're trying to take an absolute position as a relative being. You're living your life as a relative being and trying to take this absolute position, but you're identified with the relative. So you're fooled yourself. You've got a twisted mind. This is the problem with Jacques Derrida and all this kind of stuff and postmodernism and all this stuff. They are actually correct, but they take that understanding and incorrectly apply it to a relative position.
Got it. Okay. So what would be a more healthy way of doing it?
They would have to understand that their postmodern position is a relative position that's not correct. If you are knowing limits, finite, objects, if you can see something, you're ignoring the truth. The truth is the totality of consciousness. You ignore that totality to know one relative position or the other. So if you think postmodernism is the truth, and it's a thing called postmodernism, it has a beginning and an end. It has sets of rules. It has a logic. That's not the truth. That is a relativistic construct that you're playing in this game.
Right, that's an artifact of coming from a scientific, like science 1.0 kind of framework.
Yeah, it's just like again, if any ism or is or whatever is an object that you can grasp and get a hold of and tell to someone, then it's made out of ignoring the truth. And it's a relative. This is where relativity comes from within quantum mechanics. It's these relative overlapping.
This could destroy civilizations. Like honestly, like this way of thinking could destroy civilizations, because like civilizations are built upon the concepts of ignoring the damage that civilizations do in order to have a civilization in and of itself.
When you have an understanding, you accept the damage you do. So like, I want to have a civilization, right?
Yeah,
so the problem No, but the problem today is
yeah,
they're not understanding. Like, let's just want to have a civilization, okay? But I don't want anyone to get hurt. I don't want anyone to go to jail or all that. No, knowing a civilization means people that commit murders, you send them to jail. You don't let them free. Oh, but jailing people that's not conscious. That's not high awareness. We need to rehabilitate. No, you stick their asses in jail. That's the highest consciousness. That's what this is where everybody doesn't get first place trophies. This is an ignorance of the truth. The truth means, in order to have a first place, you got to have a last place. There's no such thing as first if there's no last.
That's true, because there's like
there's no billionaire sitting in a high rise on Wall Street without the bum on the street. So it's perfect the way it is. And in trying to make the bum on the street a millionaire, you're destroying the civilization. You're not understanding that that's what you're doing. You have a good heart. You want everyone to be coddled and have an easy life. But no, having a hard life is made out of knowing that you're not having an easy life. So yeah, you have a spectrum. You have it's an unlimited game here of lots of different perspectives, which is all you consciousness.
Right. But that's finite. But that's finite though. Like to say that there is like this positive, therefore you need this negative. And I agree. Like, I mean, there is an element of like, that's the whole thing about what this yin yang symbol is that like you can't have white without black, because the white defines the black and the black defines the white, right? So my issue is that like, I mean, like, how do we suppose, like, so one of my big things is I want to go to space. I want to help civilization move out into space and start developing on other planets and all this kind of thing. But like,
you're in space.
Yeah, I am in space. Yeah, but the problem is
the best, like, most advanced spaceship that you could ever design.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But the problem is that like this entire framework means that everything that we're doing is wrong, and that like really we should just be staying on the Earth, which like. Yeah, I mean, that just seems wrong.
You can explore anything you want. It's not that it's wrong to stay here or wrong to go into space. No, it's cool. Do it. You're going to learn through experience. The experience is going to teach a finite being, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Oh, you should do this. That's how AI learns, right? AI doesn't learn from being smart. No, it learns from doing every single possibility, finding out which ones don't work, and only do the good ones that do work. And that's why they need huge data sets, right? So it's just a numbers game. Well, it's a numbers game here.
The problem is that like what you're saying is that, and I think, and maybe I've got this wrong, I'm not entirely sure, is that like to do something creates its opposite. Or create space for its opposite to exist.
Yeah. So again, I would just say all occurrences are simultaneously happening. It's not like doing something creates its opposite. No, it's all pre-done. It's all occurring, and you're now just.
That's an interesting point.
Understanding the choices you've already made.
Yeah, Sam Harris did a really good talk on the. Like, was it scientific values, right? And how, like, if we take everybody suffering all the time, worst possible universe could possibly be in as like bad, right? And if you try and think that like maybe this could be better, or like if there's like maybe it'd be all right in the end, like I don't know what you're talking about, because this is absolutely bad. It's the only assumption you need to be like, okay, there are peaks and valleys in human experience based on what we perceive and like what we experience day to day, and there are right and wrong ways to move, because there would be like peaks and valleys within this space.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to go a wrong way to have a correct action.
Yeah,
like if I go out the door right now and I get in my Tesla and I crash into somebody, right? And now I go to the hospital, right? Well, that could have prevented me from doing something even stupider.
Yeah, there's a
so you just don't you can't determine that which is outside of your perception. I can't determine what I would consider a future event. So I have to go through the choices that I've made.
Yeah,
there's a great line in the Matrix.
Yeah,
there's a great line in the Matrix from that. You can't see past the choices, or you can't see past the choices you don't understand. Knowing is understanding. It is the substance of all things. The knowing, interfering, is the substance of the objects. So the choices that you are making, you're knowing them right now, and this is the understanding. And so you can't see past the choices you don't understand, because this is the game of it. You wanted to limit yourself to play this game, and then to, gee, I'm going to make some dumb choices, and I want to find out what dumb choices are. And, I'll find out if I grow. Nope. Double down on my idiocy, and I made the same dumb choice again.
Yeah.
You know, I just keep drinking here, and it's not really good for me, but I keep doing it. I'm freaking stupid. So it's like, okay, this is the game of it. And so it's on a cosmic level. It's on a level that's so beyond the limitations of these choices that you're paying attention to right now. It's so massive. When you run up against it, when you really let go of this, then you'll understand. You'll be like, oh yeah, this was. I mean, you come back here, you can't bring that understanding here because you're too limited. Just like an ant can't understand these conversations, it's too limited. It can't understand the conversation, no matter how.
Lost you, Seth, all of a second.
Talk to the end, it's limitations. It's beyond it. And that's the issue with consciousness in this whole thing, is all these little models here. This is cute, but it only works for the illusion of a finite being in the illusion of this world. Yeah. It's not the truth. Nothing I'm saying is the truth.
There was a really interesting thing I read today, and it's like tangentially related to this. And somebody on Reddit or something was asking about, like, what must have been like for these kids to go to Narnia, right? To live a life where they were effectively like medieval regents, live 40 years of life, come back through the wardrobe, and then they're kids again in like Victorian England. Like, yeah, how do you process that? And I think that's what there's a lot of people talk about. It's actually an allegory for the Great Wars and all that kind of thing, that they lived these like kind of traumatic experiences that like would change people for a lifetime, and then almost like craving coming back to innocence.
Yeah, I think, and again, psychedelics, I like that. You can have an experience that will, nothing I'm saying is going to move, especially if you're a physicist, nothing I'm saying is going to move physics. These guys are tunnel vision here. They've already said, oh, this is woo. You said the word consciousness. Yeah, this is woo woo.
Trained in boxes, right?
No, but you give that guy 15 grams of mushrooms. Oh,
yeah.
They're gonna like that'll either shatter their entire world. Like it's going to move them in a way where they're going to like question what they're doing. They're going to be like, I wasted my whole life in a physics lab. What was I doing? Or they'll come to the realization like, oh no, this is the awesomest thing. I made myself into this little human being that thought they were doing physics and they're playing around in a lab. You know, I could have been a garbage man or a mailman, but I choose to be a physicist in this lab. And I had high-powered lasers. I wrote $6 million grants, and I gave lectures, and I won the Nobel Prize. Like, they'll look at that and be like, no, that was an amazing game to play. You know, that was, wow. I'm so glad I didn't choose to be the mailman, because winning the Nobel Prize and giving these lectures, this was great.
I see.
You know, so
we can be anything.
And you are everything simultaneously. You're all of it. You're just ignoring those other limits. So that's just the again, there's nothing I can tell you. The thing to really say is like, okay, forget everything Seth's saying.
Okay.
Investigate the double slit experiment for yourself and look at it in terms of perception. Does perception involve light shining on the undetermined and then creating a perceptual image that determines that object's existence? Okay, if that's what it does, then let's look at the double slit experiment for a second, because you're shining light on an object, a slit object of undetermined existence, and you get a perceptual image of it out that's not a perceptual image. You thought it was a perceptual image, but it's not a perceptual image. But hey, when you shine light through space-time and you produce not a perceptual image, then the object imaged does not exist. So wait a minute here, nothing exists. The double slit experiment has nothing to do with photons and slits. It has nothing to do with movement. It has to do, it's an assay of visual perception. That's what it is.
Jesus Christ, Seth.
Assay of visual perception, and it tells you, because when you realize, wait, the only reason I have perception is because I think consciousness is inside my skull and I have to get that information in there.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. This stuff doesn't exist. So these images that I'm knowing, they're in consciousness.
Yeah.
So
it's actually an artifact of consciousness, yeah.
So you just have to
fascinating, man. Like,
yeah,
I mean, honestly, Seth, I knew you were onto something, but like just getting it today, like, blimey, like that, because I've experienced it. Like, I mean, I can't. It's almost like not in like any scientific, like, rigorous way, but almost like combining concepts brings it into being in a similar way.
So I would just say perception is reality. So the being that you can grasp is the finite, and perception, that finite, is what you take to be reality. Yeah. So perception is reality. Perception isn't of reality, it is it. And perception isn't light traversing space-time. Perception is through taking. So through this taking, you create the illusion of reality, and it's, you know, in quantum physics, it's really just this matrix. It's just
halfway.
Yeah, it's just really the matrix of mind. It's just a matrix, because it's just all these vectors, which is just a matrix.
Is it escapable?
And it's just this matrix of concepts that you are doing. You're playing a little game with, paying attention to certain limits of the concepts and ignoring others.
Right. So is the message of the matrix that we need to stop thinking in terms of the concepts that we currently hold and come up with new concepts?
I think the message is just,
just in that logical framework, right?
I mean, you can play in the matrix as much as you want, or you can understand you're in a matrix and then escape from it. Then you escape from it and you're like, whoa, now I know I was hiding in the matrix. That's too much. God, this is too much. I want to ignore that. I'm here for a reason. I'm ignoring my infinite being because this infinite being is too much.
Yeah.
So let's do this for a while. Then we get sick of this and say, oh, let's escape the matrix again. Then you escape the matrix and you're like, whew, too much again. Come back here.
Interesting. This is blowing my mind. I'm probably a little bit overwhelmed as well. Like, I think I probably need to go away and like process this like another like 20 times.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing is once if you kind of like really focus on double slit experiment, then you start looking at the math, and then you start saying that relativity and quantum mechanics are the same being, and then holography is also this. It's getting at all of relativity and quantum mechanics
as well. Is like, oh, there are these things outside of reality that are kind of passing through reality in some sense, but they've not like quite made that leap to the fact that actually what's happening with this supersymmetry thing is that is a concept that you've come up with outside of reality that has limited that bounds, but really it's the whole thing passing through reality.
You lost me, but you know.
Oh, so like the whole thing about supersymmetry, right, is that it's like you imagine well, I might have this wrong, but you imagine the universe as like a 2D surface, right? And you have a 3D ball, for example, that goes through that 2D surface, and it appears as like bigger or smaller objects on that 2D surface, dependent on how it passes through, where it passes through, the angle it passes through, all that kind of thing. And that basically defines all of the particles that we have in the standard model.
Yeah. So again, what I would just say is, you know, you said, oh, you've got this universe and it's this 2D plane. Well, then there's no 3D thing outside of it. There's no 3D ball passing through it.
Yeah, exactly.
So just go back to the whole universe is this 2D plane. And let's call it the imaginary plane. You're in the imagination.
There we go. We're in the
imagination. So the real supersymmetry. So if this screen is the entire, all of it, let's just cut it into this 2D plane. And so I've got my my origin here, and I've got my axes, right? So the supersymmetry is all positive values mirror all negative values. So the entire, all positive cancel all negative. This is the supersymmetry. So that the total value of the entire universe is nothing, because all positive minus all negative is 0. There's no thing here. It's 0. The illusion of things now, so if this is 0, and this is my vector coming from 0, is from an asymmetry. So I have real components and imaginary components. Well, imaginary components, this is the asymmetry of it. As I interfere real components together, I get the illusion of these objects. And when I interfere imaginary components, it makes these negative spaces. so you're able to carve out of, if this plane is just consciousness, which is, again, this is a false model, because consciousness is not a plane. It's a dimensionless. There's no dimension. So this plane is completely imaginary.
Well, so you've constrained consciousness inside of consciousness, right?
And so your little 3D ball moving through the plane is no. It's the interference of these concepts that make you think that the ball would be moving through the plane, or make it appear as if a ball would, or make it appear if there was a 3-dimensional human being. But there's only this 2-dimensional, non-dimensional conceptual structure. And this is just, it's not, you're not going to be able to grasp it with the mind, because you can't grasp superpositions. They're non-graspable. They're the entire being.
Well, so the whole thing about Schrödinger equation, right? Everything, it's the wave function is the entire state of being of everything that collapses down into some moment.
And so I would say there's no collapse, because consciousness is knowing everything simultaneously. It's only from this stack of potential that you believe that you are somehow separate or unique from it. But no, in order to know Seth, I have to know all the other potential that's not Seth. And so it's a simultaneous, it's just too big to fathom.
I have one last question, Seth, and it kind of comes to like something pretty fundamental about like the nature of reality as we currently understand it, right? Is resonance, right? And how things resonate as we go up a frequency scale. Like everything's vibration, right? But there are resonances within that, right? And you can look at the standard model. You can look at like a lot of other things with like we'll look at the what do you call it, brain waves and all this kind of thing. They happen at specific frequencies, right? When you look at when people find new particles at the LHC and all this kind of thing, they're typically a resonance peak on a background. So what are they in this logical framework?
Well, once you have one concept, they're all the same thing. They're just made out of knowing, right?
Yeah.
So again, on the imaginary plane, this is a vector, and this is a wave function. Your vector, from the origin, right? You have a sine wave, cosine. You can describe everything in terms of Fourier. Wave transforms.
Yeah.
So everything can be created from sine waves and cosine. It's like these waves. Everything's made out of these waves. The waves really are the sets in the concept.
But my reason,
and so that the resonance is that everything is the same. All structure is the same structure. It's just how much amplitude and what phase angle.
But I guess my reasoning for asking is that, like, I mean, it must speak to some deeper structure that.
Yeah, the conceptual structure.
Oh shit! Okay, well there you go.
So I'm just saying is that this is this.
But does that mean the conceptual structure that we like, the fundamental conceptual structure of consciousness, is knowable?
Well, I'm modeling it as these wave functions or vectors, which again, this is just all sine waves. So any sine wave, right? You can multiply it by an integer or something, then you would have like different octaves of your universal symphony here. So you I think resonance would just be this mathematical alignment of these different conceptual structures. So, I mean, again, if this was a two-dimensional imaginary plane and I assigned a real value of 2 to this, well, then if I had a different concept at a different amplitude, right? And then the real value was 4. Well, half of 4 is 2. There would be some sort of mathematical relationship there. Well, that mathematical relationship would be your resonance, right?
Yeah.
So you have, just like you have octaves and things. That's what the fractal nature of this occurrence that we're calling this world. That's what it is. It's the set of concepts that consciousness is knowing, and these are all related to each other, and consciousness is knowing that relation as resonance. It's
right. Okay, so it's almost like that is a concept in and of itself. I guess
my reason but I think
it feels more fundamental. I don't know. Like maybe I'm just being like kind of wooey hand wavy, but like I look at like prime numbers, right? And prime numbers being like they're only divisible by themselves and 1. Like if you look at factors going up a number line, it's all you need to give me, a number line and prime numbers. If you were to look at the values that keep occurring, including the factors for each number that goes up, you will end up with these peaks along prime numbers.
Yeah, and if you do analytic continuation and look at the Raman zeta function, you'll see a crazy pattern where the zeros all align on 1/2 or something. There's a pattern to it that you can see in these mathematical functions. There's a
right, and I guess looking at like humanity and consciousness as something that is pattern. I mean, like people talk about it as like we are pattern recognition engines, right?
Like, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know if the concept's consciousness is knowing is a pattern within the game that we're supposed to like play with, or it's a structural in order to have this particular world. No, the prime numbers have to be in this particular structural order, which if you could do that mathematical proof, which no one's done yet, right, then you discover some hidden structure of the universe or something, right? So I don't know if there's some necessity for resonance or something to structure the world in this way, or if no, this is just the pattern of it, and you are fooling yourself that there is a real structure there. See, technically, there's an illusion of structure. There's an illusion of form. See, there's an illusion of the hand is in formation.
Yeah.
So when it's out of my perceptual field of view, it's out of formation. So
out of formation, got it. Yeah.
I'm taking this to be informed. It's not really informed from the point of view that all of this is consciousness, because there's no form difference between the space between the fingers and the fingers themselves. That's an illusion. It's a misinterpretation of what's really there. So I don't know.
I don't know. Like my reasoning for asking is, it just kind of feels like a bit of a bug. If you can define it in that sense.
The bug is the feature.
Yeah, exactly. That's
the feature is the bug. So I could speculate about all kinds of crazy stuff. I have no idea. The only thing I'm really contributing to this whole game here is that I can see the double slit experiment, and that it's an assay of visual perception.
Yeah, I mean, like,
instead of a physics project, it's a biological project.
Well, like, honestly, like, one of the most unbelievable like conceptual frameworks. I think this is probably one of the most important conceptual frameworks that I've ever heard of.
Well, I really thank you for this conversation, because what I have to do is get better at writing this out and coming up with examples and coming up with ways to explain it to someone, so that I can write it in a way where someone can get a hold of it and not just be turned off from page one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure that there'll be people that watch this all the way through and be like, yeah, I can help with that. So
yeah, I mean, I love bouncing. I love talking to people. I love bouncing ideas off of people, because yeah, there's got to be a way to say this that will again advance physics. I mean, I love playing in physics. I love science. I love the game. I went to Berkeley for a reason. I love playing with big machines. I mean, we played with the synchrotron. We played with large microscope. I mean, it was
like a 3D printer. That's like the biggest machine I've got here now.
Yeah, these things were cool. Like this is fun stuff. It's amazing. And so, what can we do? How far can we take this? Like, where can we go with this?
That's it. Because there has been a breakdown, really, like or almost like a stagnation in physics and science for a very long time now. It's a lot about how do we apply everything we learned over the past 100 years, rather than like how do we advance the actual fundamental understanding.
You're running up against your beliefs. This is the problem. You're trying to force an existent physical material world. All of physics works in this consciousness, because that's all that's really here, and it does do the job. You could have all of your physical beliefs so that you could play with this thing as a model, but you have to understand that there is no physical world outside of consciousness. And then now that those limitations of physical materiality, you break through those, and then maybe you can advance your physics.
It's like confusing the map for the territory, right?
Yeah, and that's a confusing, I mean, so the map is also in the territory. That's the issue with it. That's why when I said, like, you in this little experiment, like I said, oh, you can't see what you believe that there's actual images inside Seth's brain, that he's seeing these objects that are outside of consciousness in his brain. Okay, you can't see that. You can't. You need to take the territory and put it in like this, again, like this is perfect, this little screen here, and then the edges of my screen now represent my field of view. Now I can see what you're seeing. I can perceive perception. So I'm perceiving what the perceiver is perceiving. So now I can do experiments on it, and I can see what's going on. So yeah, people are confusing the math for they can't get outside of themselves to see themselves, because there's no outside of consciousness. You can't get outside of consciousness to find out what's out there, because there isn't anything outside of consciousness. Like so we did this little game here. We did this little game here of making this little model of perception, so that we can do assays on it to see what perception really is. And that's the key to this. That's the key to the double slit experiment. That's why it's so confusing to people, because it's impossible. You're like, no, it's not possible. You can't have, you need two lines on there. You can't have a distributed pattern of lines. It's impossible. But your beliefs are blocking you. Your beliefs are saying there has to be something, there has to be an object out there. And by object out there, they mean something outside of consciousness. Yeah. Instead of the object is an interference pattern. The interference pattern makes information, like the informed hand here. It's out of formation, it's information. Out of formation, information. Perception is the measurement. There are no machines out there. There are no large hadron colliders making measurements. If you don't perceive the bubble chamber in the Large Hadron Collider, there's no measurement. The value only occurs once it comes in consciousn's, in perception. So I've got, I've made this measurement of the Large Hadron Collider. Here it is. But if it's out here, there's no measurement. Now I've measured it. Once I've perceived it. So perception is your measurement. And measurement informs values, and values have boundaries. And so the formation of boundaries, the formation of any bounded thing is perception. And so there are no scientific tools doing anything out there. It's consciousness. You have to have perception to have value, to have measurements, to know boundaries, to know separation. It's the whole thing. Perception is reality.
I think we've made it, Seth. Seth, thank you so much for your time today. This has been honestly, I think you've set me on my own personal paradigm shift to start beginning to interrogate how this affects my life, if you can call it my life. And how I apply it day to day.
Question everything, because you are the authority. The you that is really you is consciousness. That's the I that you refer to yourself as.
Yeah, I see it now.
So
fascinating. Seth, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
No worries.